There's no question there's been a great deal of misinformation surrounding COVID-19, as well as information that has evolved and changed as the pandemic has unfolded. As we all know, you can't trust everything you see on social media and the internet. In this week's in-depth discussion, Susan Cadot and her guests tackle some of the myths and misconceptions surrounding the virus.
That's right, Rich. Some call them COVID concerns, others call them COVID conspiracy theories. Either way, we're going to tackle some of the more well-trafficked ideas on social media with our guests today on In-Depth, and I'd like to introduce them to you now. First, we have Dr. Dale Bratzler, who is the Chief COVID Officer for the OU College of Medicine. We have Dr. Mary Clark, President of the Oklahoma State Medical Association. And we have Catherine Sweeney with State Impact Oklahoma out of Oklahoma City. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us today. If we're on social media, we've all seen some things or we've heard some things from friends and family, and there is so much going around. So let's just dive in, and we're going to go round robin and ask you, throw some of these ideas at each of you and get your opinion. Catherine, we're going to start with you. One of the most prevalent pieces of information that has appeared repeatedly on social media is the vaccine is unsafe and may contain microchips that would allow the government to track my movements.
I think that anybody who has seen what these needles look like and how tiny they are could tell you microchips are not going to fit in that needle. And that it's, as long as you have one of these, you can be tracked anyway. There's not really an incentive to put a microchip in your vaccine. That isn't happening.
Dr. Clark, we're going to address the second point. COVID is no worse than the seasonal flu. Is that true or false?
That is false. We were hoping that that was going to be true at the beginning of the pandemic or in late 19, early 2020, but that has proven not to be true. We have thousands of people infected with influenza on a yearly basis, and relatively small numbers die, but we do try and vaccinate as many people as we can for that. So we mitigate some of that. The COVID infection of COVID-19 currently has killed 4 million people worldwide. It is nothing like influenza. The symptoms are different and the severity is much, much higher in COVID-19.
Is the fact that it's easily transferred another factor as well? Absolutely.
We know now that the COVID virus itself spreads much quicker than other airborne viruses. And we're also finding that the new variants, including the current Delta variant, spreads faster than the original variant, the wild type, and may have more variants coming up from development for that too.
It'd be terrible to see us go backwards. And speaking of that, Dr. Bratzler, we're coming to you. There's a little bit of feeling, I've been vaccinated, I'm safe. I want to go ahead and go around without my mask and not have to wear a mask. And there is a lot of, I'm not sure I'm calling this a myth so much as a debate. Should those who have been vaccinated have to wear a mask and take all the precautions that the non-vaccinated need to?
Our thinking on this is one of the things that we've learned over time. There was just recently an outbreak in Cape Cod that showed that 469 people were infected. And 364 of those people were fully vaccinated. Now, most of them did not end up in a hospital and didn't get very sick. But we now know, particularly with the Delta variant, it's essentially acting like a new virus, that even if you're fully vaccinated, you can get infected and you can potentially spread that infection to other people. So we now have a strong recommendation that if you've been fully vaccinated, again, your chance of getting infection is reduced and your chance of complications is lower, but you can get infected. So we recommend when you're indoors around other people that you wear a mask. This pandemic is not over yet.
I'd like to ask you something. I heard that if you're vaccinated, the response to the symptoms happens once it gets into your system, but the virus itself can live in your nasal passages before it gets into your system. So you do have the contaminants there, and you can spread them until it shuts it down. Am I hearing something wrong here, or is that correct?
No, that's correct. In fact, a study came out yesterday that showed that even people who develop symptoms will often spread the virus for a couple of days before they exhibit symptoms, and then they pass the most virus, or they shed the most virus during that time frame that they're symptomatic, but in the first few days of symptoms. So even if you don't know you're infected, you may be spreading the virus.
I'm going to play devil's advocate real quick one more time. Dr. Bratzler, what about those who say, well, if I get sick, if I'm a breakthrough patient, I've been vaccinated, I'll just feel a little bad for a few days and then be okay. Why is it my responsibility to take care of those who are not vaccinated, who refuse to get vaccinated?
Well, I've highlighted this as a civic responsibility to protect those around you. It's part of being a citizen to try to protect the vulnerable that may be around you. When you go out, let's say you go to a restaurant or you go shopping or other things, you don't know who the people are around. You don't know if they might have some immunocompromising condition. Maybe they have cancer or they're at risk to get this infection. You simply don't know. So it's one of our important responsibilities, even if you're fully vaccinated, to go ahead and wear a mask when you're in public to protect those around you and to protect yourself from possibly being a breakthrough case.
Catherine, we're swinging back around to you. Some folks do believe that because messaging from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, has changed, some say it's flip-flop, that it means, they're not really telling the truth and they don't know when to believe what the CDC says. Do you think that's a valid argument?
I think that the CDC has just classically been a little bit slow, not necessarily flip-flopping. Sometimes they've been very cautious, and they don't want to have to tell people, do this, do this, do this, and then walk that back. They'd rather say, we're not sure if you need to do this, and then say, actually, you definitely should. So Stat News interviewed several people who used to work at the CDC. They talked to former director Rich Besser, and he said, we've always been a more conservative, slower institution. And we also need to remember this is a novel virus. There are things that we didn't understand about it when it hit the scene. There are things we didn't understand about the new variants when those came out. If you'll remember, way back at the very beginning of this, we were really concerned about surface transmission, that we would touch things and then the virus would be on our hands and then we would spread it that way, because a lot of viruses do spread that way. But we've learned as time has gone on that it's more of a respiratory transmission than a surface transmission virus. And people, were Lysoling off their groceries, and we know now that's not necessary. So it's just, this is an evolution and we need to keep that in mind. Just in regards to what we were talking about, protecting people who are not vaccinated and what is my responsibility in that, I think one thing we really need to remember is nobody under 12 can get vaccinated. So children are some of our most vulnerable people in our communities don't have the option to get vaccinated. I don't think that it's a stretch to say that we should feel responsible for helping to protect them.
That's a good point, Catherine. Thank you. Dr. Clark, recently people have been trying, I'm going to read this one because, and I hope I don't mispronounce the word, have been trying to treat COVID with the anti-parasite drug for animals called ivermectin, and many are becoming sick. Do you know if a lot of people are out there experimenting? Should they just trust the vaccine? I mean, if you're going to experiment with an animal drug, why not just get the vaccine?
Right. Yes, there are a lot of people that are using ivermectin as a preventative and or a treatment. There's a particular study that came out in the Journal of Therapeutics, the July-August edition, that was a meta-analysis, which means we did retrospective interviews with patients, and there was some suggestion that people who did take ivermectin maybe did better, but those studies can't really tease out other variables. So that's not really studies that we use to change our practice clinically. Ivermectin is a medication that can be used theoretically in humans in a very rare case, but 99.9% of the time it's used in cattle, horses, and cows. And what people are doing is they're going to feed stores, picking up doses that are concentrated for cattle and reading internet guesstimates about what kind of dose you take and when, which is leading to overdosing and secondary side effects and making people sick. And it can be anything from a rash, nausea, vomiting, headache, GI symptoms, diarrhea, low blood pressure, coma, death. I mean, there are everything that you could possibly have with something are potential side effects with ivermectin. And we're seeing a lot of the poison control centers getting calls on these. It is not recommended for COVID-19 prevention or treatment. Merck, who is the manufacturer in the United States for ivermectin, has also come out as a position statement saying it is not recommended, or we do not recommend it, and there is no efficacy shown to use in prevention or treatment. So please, please, please do not use ivermectin. There is a treatment available, a preventative available from COVID-19 that has been widely studied. That's called the COVID-19 vaccine. Pfizer vaccine is now been fully FDA approved. It has been given to 1.2 billion people worldwide, billion. It has been proven to be safe, proven to be extremely effective. We have the data on that. We do not have the data on ivermectin. So please, please get vaccinated.
Dr. Bressler, early on, we heard a lot about something called hydrochloroquine. Is that still a thing? Are people still using that? Do you think something like that helps?
Yeah, so just as Dr. Clark mentioned for ivermectin, there were some early studies that suggested, mostly observational studies, that suggested that hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil might prevent or reduce some of the symptoms in COVID-19. But then that drug was subjected to well-designed, randomized clinical trials where people were blinded to the treatment that they were receiving. All of those other potential variables that Dr. Clark mentioned were taken out of consideration. And what they showed was the drug didn't work. It did not reduce infection rates with COVID-19. It did not reduce symptoms. And in fact, some patients actually had complications from use of the drug. So it is no longer used. And frankly, as you know, we sold our stockpile.
It's hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Thank you, doctor. Catherine, this next one I have not heard, but others have. Does 5G a factor in the spread of COVID? 5G technology?
5G is basically Wi-Fi, right? That is it's like cell signal, internet that goes to your cell phone from the big towers. And that is a digital signal that can upload to digital technology. We are biological. As much as I wish that I could download a faster metabolism or maybe the ability to speak Mandarin, unfortunately I can't, but that does mean that I also can't accidentally download the coronavirus.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Clark, this next one, we're using ultraviolet light to disinfect surfaces. Why can't we use that on the human body?
Well, ultraviolet light is effectively damaging to cell membranes, which is why we are able to use it for bacteria, viruses, and surfaces, because surfaces are inanimate. There are no cell membranes on surfaces. If you use ultraviolet light on human skin, externally, internally, you're going to damage the cells that make up your body. And unfortunately, you can't sterilize your skin. There is no way to completely remove every virus, every bacteria, every yeast that's on your skin that is part of us, that is part of our normal flora. And that is absolutely impossible. You would kill the host before you would kill everything that you needed to.
All right, this is my final question. We're running out of time, and just a quick answer from the doctors. Do you believe and I have heard this one, some believe the numbers are being fudged. Some deaths are being attributed to COVID that are not particularly due to COVID. I know you guys are deep into this with your positions, your high positions and your knowledge of what's going on with COVID, not only here in Oklahoma, but in the nation. Is this one true or false? And now, Dr. Bratz, I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, so it's patently false. There is no there is no incentive for any of us to overdiagnose COVID-19 or to diagnose deaths due to COVID-19. There is no financial incentive. There is no incentive to do that. We recently had a conference call where we brought in the state medical examiner who walked through how they assign death. And again, if a person has a car crash and happens to have a positive COVID test, that actually is not counted as a COVID death. It's only those diagnoses where COVID contributes to the death. That's how deaths get counted.
We're out of time. I know there's more we could talk about. I'd like to thank all of you for your frank answers to some of these questions. You know, if they're circulating around, we think they need to be answered. And so thank you for working with us to do that. And I'm sure we'll be back to talk to you again in the future about this. Thank you all.